In 2016, the town of Wareham voted yes to legalize recreational marijuana. Even though in Massachusetts, recreational marijuana is legal under federal government, it's still considered as an illegal substance. This discrepancy has caused a lot of confusion to the local town governments, people wondering when will they be able to shop for recreational marijuana. To clarify any confusion and stance on recreational marijuana in the town of Wareham, in addition to what the town is doing in order to prepare for potential marijuana retailers, cultivators, and the manufacturers, is the chairman of Wareham Board of Selectmen, Mr. Peter Teitelbaum. Thank you so much for being with me this morning.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Now, Peter, people are angry. In this town, those who have voted yes to legalize recreational marijuana, they're asking themselves, why the delay? Why is it taking so long?
Ask Beacon Hill. Well, to go back in the history a little bit, there was the ballot question in the 2016 election. People need to realize that this ballot question was substantially written by and promoted by and financed by, if you will, some fairly large-scale out-of-state people who were interested in investing in the marijuana market in Massachusetts. The real goal, I think, of the original authors wasn't so much to legalize it for homegrown use, although they realized in order to attract a vote they had to do that, but they had a financial interest in doing so. So what they passed was so loose, had no regulation, and simply would have created a gigantic unregulated market in the Commonwealth that the legislature said, well, okay, wait a minute. We don't want to overturn the original intent here, but we do want to make it subject to sensible regulation. And where it was an entirely new industry, if you will, they took their time doing it. It took them time to come up with the Cannabis Control Commission law that put the Cannabis Control Commission in effect so that they could pass regulations and become, in effect, the licensing body for these things. It's taken some time to figure out how municipalities might be able to regulate it at the local level. And so that's essentially what's happened here. The town hasn't held this up, I can tell you that.
No. Okay.
Even if we wanted to open up a pot shop in 2017, we couldn't have done it.
Now, we also have our own we also have to make sure that our bylaws, we have to set our own bylaws to regulate recreational marijuana, the stores and so forth, when the state says, okay, now it's time. And I understand that April 1st is
That's the day that people can begin applying for licenses as cultivators, distributors, marketers, what have you, producers,
yes,
and retail sales.
And so we have to make sure that we are ready, whatever our little bylaws are going to be about, that by April 1st, we are ready to accept these applications. Now, that brings me to the special town meeting that is scheduled for March 12th. Yes. So tell us a little bit about what this meeting is going to be about.
Well, as selectmen, we called it in finally getting some answers from the state as to whether our moratorium, which runs out July 1. And by the way, the Cannabis Control Commission, there won't be any retail shops opening before July 1. But people, they finally adjusted the regulations. We were told last year you should put a moratorium in place to protect yourself in the event that the shops are legalized, so that you have the time to develop bylaws to regulate, the time, place, manner, how many, where they go, all that kind of stuff. So that's what we did last year. At the Springtown meeting in 2017. We put a moratorium in place, and that also expires, I believe, July 1st.
Yeah, yes.
So that's on the books. So the first thing we have to do is to rescind the moratorium. Because you can't have, yes, you can have shops here, here, and here, but there's a moratorium. You can't have the conflicting laws. So we've got to get rid of the moratorium. The second piece is the state has said that communities that have voted yes originally can have a bylaw that limits how many marijuana retail shops there are, but they can't do it less than 20% of the amount of retail liquor licenses. And by retail liquor, I don't mean restaurants, I mean package stores. And we've got 13 in the town, so 13 divided by 5 is 2.6. We were told at one point you round down, and just to get into some of the confusion here, at one point we were told you round down, and now we're being told, no, you got to round up. Okay. I actually questioned the rounding down. I said, who does that? Nobody rounds down. If it's 2.5 or more, you go to 3. I mean, that's what they teach in second grade, right? Yes. So 3 is the fewest that we can have. Okay. But without a bylaw, there's no limit on the number of retail sales establishments.
Now, when you say without a bylaw, there's no limit on the amount of recreational stores that we're going to have in this town of Wareham. So what is the magical number? What are you thinking? How many stores?
We've heard from people who have experience out in Colorado and Washington. Colorado allowed municipalities to set some limits, and their recreational marijuana industry is thriving because they didn't hand out a ton of licenses. The retailers weren't competing as much with each other, and they came up with what they felt was a healthy balance between allowing the trade to occur, but yet not allowing people to just knock each other off. You know, we don't need 20 retail marijuana shops in Wareham. I don't think anybody would argue that we do. So you try to come up with a number where people have access to it. You try to spread them out around the town so that people have access to it and, don't have to drive from, Buzzards Bay almost all the way to West Wareham to buy it. But initially you can limit the number. If you find that number isn't sufficient to serve your populace, if there's lines out the door, then you can always go back and increase the number. So
we're going to start small and see how things are going, and then...
Yeah, I think that's probably the best approach. Okay. People are making big investments in this too. This isn't peanuts, So, to the extent that this is going to happen anyway, you want the people to succeed because it's in our interest for them to succeed, because that brings me to the next portion of what the town meeting is about, which is the state is saying you can adopt a general bylaw, not a zoning bylaw, but a general bylaw that allows you to collect the local tax of 3% on the sales. So we certainly will be asking people to vote for that as well.
Well, in this, and I'm glad you brought that up, when I told on social media our residents in Wareham that I'm going to be having this conversation with you today, most of them who are for recreational marijuana, they said, think about the incentive, tax incentive. Like, we are going to be taxing these stores. We are going to have money in this town, money that can be, people suggested put into schools, fix this and that.
Well, it'll be like any other revenue. We don't have an earmark from it.
But how much money are we talking about, though? And where's that money going to go? How is that money going to come back into our town? Are we going to keep it? Is it ours?
It will go into just like any other tax, like the restaurant tax, the hotel motel tax. It's the same kind of thing. Okay. It's a tax on trade, and it will go into the town's general fund. All funds that come into the town go into the general fund unless there's some other separate earmark for it. And you usually have to go to the state legislature to do that. For example, our community events committee gets money from a couple of different taxation sources. I think they get money from parking revenues, and I think they also get the hotel tax, I think, is also a secondary means by which they can get money. But in order to take those monies as they come in and dedicate them to that specific purpose to be expended by that committee, it took an act of the legislature. We can't do those things on our own. Okay. So all of these monies typically come in, and they go into our general fund, which is what we fund the regular budget with, in addition to state aid and all the other things that come in to help the town.
So we are going eventually be using the money to help our town. Okay.
And it'll probably be the same system as the meals tax and the rooms tax. I haven't looked into that aspect of it that much.
Speaking of bylaws, where are you considering to put these stores?
Well, in talking to people, especially the people in the village districts, Onset and right down here in Wareham Center, the thought was that they weren't necessarily happy about it, in the same sense that they might not want a liquor store there. They're concerned about the people that will be there. They're concerned about people hanging around and this, that, and the other thing. And I sort of get that. I kind of agree that
Hanging around where, though? Because you can buy, it's controlled, right? You go and purchase it. You're not lighting it outside just like that.
But there will be some of that, I think. That's just going to happen.
Yeah. I'm saying that then you're opening yourself to some consequences, such as we have liquor stores. You go and buy liquor, but you're not opening a bottle and start drinking it as you walk by, right?
Well, some people do, and that's kind of my point here. I don't want to get too far into that, but the villages probably aren't the best places for this, and that's been sort of the feeling all along. If right now on the books we allow medicinal marijuana, we do have a host agreement with one outfit called Compassionate Care that we executed in 2014 or 2015, I think. They are across from Bessie Park. We put them in what's the so-called institutional zone, which is actually where the hospital is, and it runs up into the schools and everything else. It's before people freak out. It's more than 500 feet away from the schools, so the kids aren't going to walk by it on their way out of school. But there's a thought that, okay, and this is something that we've been discussing, with the director of planning and selectmen and just generally people, as we run into them and have this conversation, is you want something probably in East Wareham along Cranberry Highway. You want something that will serve West Wareham and possibly the industrial park. And the third area would be the institutional area, because there's already the medicinal marijuana folks who are going to be in there and are going to be opening up soon. And they've expressed interest in a retail license as well. So, 3 shops spread out. Nobody has to go more than a couple of miles to purchase. Should serve the population adequately, I think. And like I say, if there's lines out the door on Saturday afternoon, then we'll know that perhaps it's time to create a couple more licenses and amend the bylaw to do that.
So, from our discussion today, it seems like this entire process of, not only legalizing recreational marijuana, but having the stores is such a complicated process. Now, to your opinion, why is this so complicated rather than dealing with like a liquor license or a cigar store license?
Well, you got to remember, with liquor and tobacco, it's taken 300 years of history to get to this point.
So you think 300 more years?
Well, no. But I'm just saying that where it seems like a pretty cut and dried process now, it's because the licensing statutes, there's been some form of licensing for these establishments dating back.
Now, also the bylaws, are they going to detail how these stores are going to look like? Are we talking about glass windows and flashy products out there?
State regulations actually, we have a local sign bylaw that'll have something to do with it. They'll have to follow the same limits as every business in town. But as far as that stuff goes, the state actually has regulated that. You can't, for example, have a sign up with a marijuana leaf. You can't really draw too much attention, for whatever reason. That's what they've done at the state legislature. So that's out of our hands. They've already done that. To the extent that we would have wanted to have gotten involved, I don't know if we would have or not, but we don't get to be. They've already, in constitutional law, there's an expression called cleared the field, and that's when the government that's above your government decides something once and for all. You don't have any say in it. So they've cleared the field. We don't have any particular say in how these things look. I mean, I suppose we could go into some we could probably adopt more strict appearance guidelines and this, that, and the other thing, but there's really no point. The state has already done all that for us, I guess.
Now, there was one of the concerns that caught my eye is somebody from the social media asked this question. They say that our area has a drug problem, and to see these stores come in, recreational marijuana come in, it's going to add into that drug problem. Do we really need to have them in our town?
Well, in order to not have them, we would have to go back to a general election, get the town to vote no. That's costly. That would cost us thousands. It's about $15,000 to run an election in this town. We don't do it for free. The people spoke pretty clearly. I think the vote was 56 or 57%. Yes. In Wareham, we actually exceeded the state percentage. We're past 53 to 47. So the people have spoken.
But are you concerned as the chairman of the selectmen in this town? Are you concerned?
By the time you're old enough to buy this stuff, I don't think it's going to create. This stuff isn't going to be sold for $20 an ounce. This stuff's expensive in these shops. I mean, you're talking $200, $250 an ounce for this stuff. It's not going to make it cheaper. It's, we already have the ability right now to grow up to 12 plants in our homes. And I think a lot of people, when they go to the store and see the sticker shock, they might take to that approach and say, hey, wait a minute, what can I do? So I'm not overly concerned about it. Marijuana has been widely consumed in this country for decades, whether it was legal or not. I mean, I grew up in the 70s, come on. it's, 80% of us were smoking pot. It's just a fact of life. Is it a gateway drug? Yeah, I suppose you can make that argument. What's interesting is some people have done research, and this was what the promoters did when they were trying to get the state to legalize, was they tried it and came up with research that said that places that did legalize had less of an opioid problem. I don't know how they tied the two together. I haven't examined the research that much. To me, I think my personal guess is it's largely going to be a wash. Okay. Somebody who's 21 years old, they're either already smoking pot or they're not.
So March 12th, yes, it is March 12th, yes. The special town meeting, and you're hoping people are going to vote for the tax, the 3% tax increase.
Yeah, that would go in the general bylaws, okay. Not the zoning bylaws. So there would be three zoning bylaws at issue. One would be to limit the number. The second would be to rescind the prior moratorium so that the new bylaws could take effect. And the third would be to decide what zones the various things could take place in. Because remember too, cultivation, is one thing, and retail sales are another. Cultivation takes place in warehouses. Nobody even sees what's going on. We've got an industrial park with some empty buildings. That would be an ideal place for cultivation. Do we want, East Wareham, for example, along Cranberry Highway, is that a place where, you wouldn't care if somebody put up, just a plain old gray sheet metal building and, people use this, 8 parking spaces for the workers to go in and do their thing and grow this stuff? Is that something that people are going to get up in arms about? We'll find a lot of this out at the public hearing, and that's an important aspect too. There's a public hearing on this that the planning board is conducting on February 12th. Yes. And I'm anticipating quite a few people will show up for that. At that point, the sort of draft bylaws will be put out there. And just so people understand the process here, the selectmen will be closing the warrant, which is the articles, for this meeting this coming Tuesday. But the articles we put on will be placeholders. They're going to say something along the lines of, to see if the town will vote to limit the number of retail marijuana establishments, period. And that's all it's going to say. To see if the town will vote to restrict retail marijuana sales to certain zoning districts, and that'll be the next thing. Because we don't want to get too restrictive in the articles because we don't know what's going to come out of the public hearing. Soon after that, our town planner has been working on some draft bylaws. He's been reviewing them with town council and back and forth with a couple of the selectmen. And so those will be published well in advance of the February 12th meeting. We'll get those out there probably next week. Okay. So that on the 12th, people can come in and say, okay, this is what you're thinking of doing. Well, I have this concern, or yeah, I like this, but you should do more of that. That way they have enough time to look at them, study them, and can come in with their questions and concerns. Okay. And then after February 12th, will come the process of any rewrites that people are looking for. Now that doesn't mean if you have a problem with it that your problem is going to be addressed. I mean, if you're the only one in the room that doesn't like something, but if a host of people come in and say, well, you need to think about this, this, and this, it's going to give some thought to reworking the draft.
Well, thank you so much for clarifying all this information and sharing what our town is doing and the preparations that are taking in place to make sure that by April 1st, we're ready to accept those applications. And
well, we'll accept. We have to accept them no matter what, even if the town meeting doesn't vote to adopt any regulations. The applicants will be coming. It's like Paul Revere. The British are coming. The British are coming. Well, yeah, they are.
The applications are going to be coming.
They'll be coming. So at that point, and something else to realize is that the application allows the selectmen negotiate the host agreements with these people. Still, just like we did for the medicinal marijuana. So that doesn't mean that because somebody applied on April 1st that their shop's going to open up, July 1st necessarily. There's still the whole negotiating process with them. Now, a lot of the negotiation has been sort of settled by the regulations that are in place. We don't have a lot of say in that. For example, we can't charge more than 3%. We'd like to. I have a question. I'm going to run it by town council. When I'm laying in bed at night trying to go to sleep and all this stuff pops into my brain, can we negotiate a higher tax if people are willing? Can we make it a competition?
To my viewers, thank you so much for watching. Again, in the studio, I was joined by the chairman of Wareham Board of Selectmen, Mr. Peter Teitelbaum. Together, we were discussing recreational marijuana in Wareham, when the town should be expecting to see pot shops, where these stores are going to go, in addition to touch upon the special town meeting scheduled for March 12, which aims to settle all questions regarding recreational marijuana sales in Wareham. From WCTV, I am Queen Banda. I wish you all a wonderful day.